All of Galadriel's powers in The Lord of the Rings explained. The Lord of the Rings is full of iconic elves, and Galadriel is one of them, with a range of mysterious abilities. Galadriel is one of the most powerful elves in The Lord of the Rings, but it isn't always obvious why, from watching the movies. Peter Jackson's acclaimed The Lord of the Rings movie trilogy adapted one part of J.R.R. Tolkien's novel per movie. The Lord of the Rings. The Fellowship of the Ring represented Part 1, The Fellowship of the Ring. Galadriel was quite faithful to the book in this movie, showing herself to have magical insight. However, the term magic was dubious in The Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien often associated it with evil in his legendarium, equating it more to the dark and artificial sorcery of Morgoth and Sauron than to the innate abilities of the elves. Tolkien advised that the use of the term wasn't entirely consistent throughout all of his texts. Galadriel could overpower most elves in Lord of the Rings, possessing more than just the innate elvish magic. But it takes diving into Tolkien's lore to explain how and why, as the movies distorted the canon somewhat. Galadriel is one of the most powerful elves in the Lord of the Rings canon. Galadriel is not just one of the best characters in the Lord of the Rings, but the greatest of her house. Galadriel was the greatest of the Noldor, except Fëanor maybe, though she was wiser than he and her wisdom increased with the long years. The Noldor are one of 3 great houses of the Eldar, along with the Teleri and the Vaenir. As Noldor nobility, Galadriel is elvish royalty and subject to all the privileged upbringing that comes with it, from education to training. It is telling that Galadriel is greater than Fëanor. Fëanor was the creator of Lord of the Rings' famous Silmarils and the bringer of the War of the Jewels. Besting Fëanor for historical greatness is no mean feat, indicating huge renown in universe. The Vaenir lay largely outside the lore and legend provided by Tolkien in his legendarium, as they stayed in Valinor with the Valar, keeping out of trouble. The Teleri, meanwhile, were mainly renowned in the First Age, splintering off into the Sindar and Nandor. Third Age elves of note, like Thranduil and his son, Legolas, were Sindarin elves. Galadriel had notable advantages over these elves too. Galadriel has several psychic powers in J.R.R. Tolkien's lore. Galadriel has psychic powers in The Lord of the Rings. Galadriel has telepathic abilities in both the books and the movies. In the books, this is known as Osunwi, interchange of thought. J.R.R. Tolkien discussed this at length in an essay, Osunwi Kenta, Inquiry into the Communication of Thought, published in Morgoth's Ring in 1993. All Middle-earth species have the innate ability for this, so it doesn't technically count as magic. In Middle-earth, folk of an advanced education, such as Galadriel, wouldn't even see it as a power. But to readers and hobbits, it appears so. Osunwi takes practice to refine and can involve reading the minds of open individuals, but never those of any that are closed. All visions of the future are actually just Osunwi, thoughts sent by the Valar or Middle-earth's god. Galadriel is one of the oldest characters in the Lord of the Rings movies, so she had a lot of time to perfect her technique by the time of the events of the Fellowship of the Ring. In The Hobbit, Galadriel attacked the necromancer energetically, possibly using her ring, which didn't occur in the book. Galadriel boasts extraordinary physical strength in The Lord of the Rings. Galadriel is shown to be a fighter in Amazon Prime Video's The Lord of the Rings. The Rings of Power, which aligns with her battle prowess in Unfinished Tales. In J.R.R. Tolkien's masterwork, The Lord of the Rings, Galadriel was more of a white witch than a warrior. She was imbued with purity imagery and symbolism, and was partially inspired by the Virgin Mary of Tolkien's Catholic faith. But Tolkien wrote more earthy versions of Galadriel in stories created both before and after The Lord of the Rings. Some of these were published in Unfinished Tales,